Good morning, Committee Chair Edson. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Good morning. How is everyone?
Good morning. We do have a quorum, ma'am.
Great. At this time, I would like to call the March 1st, 2022 NCTD Executive Committee meeting to order. Imelda, please call the roll.
Thank you, ma'am. Committee Chair Edson,
Here.
Committee Vice Chair Bat Patel,
Here.
Committee Member Jenkins,
Here.
Committee Member Contreras.
Present.
Thank you.
Great. Welcome, everyone. Imelda will now provide a safety brief and review evacuation procedures.
Thank you, ma'am. In case of an emergency, I will dial 911. In case of an evacuation, please take the stairs. Do not use the elevators. Once cleared of the building, do not re-enter unless cleared to do so by emergency personnel. There are fire extinguishers and first aid kits on each floor of the building. There is a portable defibrillator on the first floor and staff on hand trained on CPR procedures if needed. This concludes my safety brief.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Imelda. There are, Imelda, do we have any public comments today?
No, ma'am.
Great. At this time, we will end the public registration to speak on this item. There are 3 items on our agenda today. Laura Cote, Chief Administrative Officer, will review agenda item number 1, the CY 2022 Executive Committee Work Plan. Laura?
Yes, hi, good morning, Chair and members of the Executive Committee. So this item is asking the committee to adopt its annual work plan for calendar year 2022. And as you can see here, there are 5 items being proposed over 2 meetings. The meeting today will cover a presentation by Mr. Tucker regarding the proposed FY 2023 budget, and there is a closed session item as well regarding the General Counsel performance review. In October, staff is proposing that this committee review any recommended changes to the board policies before they are presented to the full board as part of the agency's annual review of its policies. And then the other item we have for October is a closed session item related to the performance review for the executive director. So next slide, please. The recommendation before you today is that the executive committee is asked per NCTD board policy number 3, committees and external appointments to adopt a work plan for the calendar year 2022. And that concludes my presentation. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Imelda, do we have any public comments on this item?
No, ma'am, we do not.
Okay, at this time, we're ending the public registration to speak on this item. Are there any questions from board members, committee members? I see no hands raised here. I see no hands raised. Okay, no questions at this point. Matt Tucker, Executive Director, will review. Do you need something else?
Yes, ma'am. We do need to vote on adopting this recommendation. And is there a motion?
Yeah, I can go ahead and move the staff recommendation.
And I'll second that. Motion by Bat Patel, second by Edson. Please call the vote.
Thank you. On the motion of Committee Vice Chair Bat Patel, seconded by Committee Chair Edson to adopt the CY 2022 Executive Committee Work Plan. Committee Chair Edson, how do you vote, please?
Yes.
Committee Vice Chair Bat Patel?
Aye.
Committee Member Jenkins?
Aye.
Committee Member Contreras?
Aye.
Motion passes with all committee members present voting yes.
Thank you so much. Matt Tucker, Executive Director, will review agenda item number 2, the Executive Director's report on proposed FY 2023 budget guidance and strategic areas of focus. Matt?
Good morning, everyone. This is the compilation of different elements that go into our budget document on an annual basis. This is kind of the build up to the final adoption of the budget document that occurs in June. Along the steps, you will see that various committees interface with staff in terms of supporting the overall development of the budget. For example, the marketing, the MISPA committee will be reviewing the service implementation plan, which includes the ridership forecast. The Performance Administration and Finance Committee will be reviewing the budget in May before it goes to the board in June. So throughout the process, there's going to be opportunity for the board to provide input and guidance and direction to support the adoption of a new budget document. Next slide, please, Imelda. All right, so this is the budget timeline. It shows us having an adopted budget by June 16th. Could you go back, Imelda? Okay, and the kickoff, as always, is with the budget guidance and the strategic areas of focus. So I put together a set of proposals, and you guys get to say whether or not you like my proposals. Next slide, please. This slide just a repeat of what I just stated, but it's key to understand. So I'm putting forth kind of my proposed budget guidance and strategic areas of focus. You will have input in terms of saying whether or not those are items that make sense for the district. Should we be focusing in different areas? So I always start by providing an outline based upon the information that I have available to me. Following that, we will be going to the board to adopt the full set of executive directors' proposed budget guidance and strategic areas of focus, because that ultimately drives the entire budget development process. Any questions whatsoever about this process? Hearing none, next slide, please, Imelda. So as always, what I try to do is kind of do an assessment of the lay of the land in terms of what should be shaping not just a one-year budget, but from the 5-year budget perspective. And so over the next couple of slides, I'm going to outline some of these things that I think are major thought process or major themes for us to think about in terms of our budget. Obviously, challenges from the COVID-19 pandemic, ridership and customer revenue has declined as a matter of the pandemic. It's something we need to be very thoughtful about. Inflation, I'm sure all of you all are experiencing this in all facets of life, business and personal life, seeing increased costs, personnel shortages across the board, both public and private agencies are experiencing it. We're going to be coming to you all in March to talk about a temporary service reduction on Breeze based on the shortage of bus operators that exist today. Obviously, wage pressures are increasing, meaning we need to pay more to attract and retain employees. And there's just overwhelmed supply chains. You can't make assumptions about what's going to be readily available to you like you could in the past. On the other hand, there's good news, great news, in terms of increased state and federal funding. The Infrastructure and Investment and Jobs Act, you'll hear the acronym IIJA a lot, particularly if you attend the APTA conference, American Public Transportation Association conference. That's going to be like a baseline of a 30% increase in funding to the transit agencies, which is significant, but with the understanding that primarily those dollars go towards capital activities and preventative maintenance and does not support operating costs such as fuel or labor costs associated with operators. Also, on a very positive note, state budget surpluses and the governor's intent to put additional revenues into the pot for transportation and public transportation agencies. I would also tell you within the California Transit Association, they are now making direct appeals to the governor to increase funding, one-time funding to transit agencies to support operating costs. And then there is increased funding right now from local sales taxes. I mean, I think all of us are very pleasantly surprised to see that revenues that have been generated exceed what we all thought it was going to be.
Todd, I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
The IIJA increase, does that come directly through to us or does it go through Sandag?
Well, all of the money flows through, and this is for all agencies. All federal money flows through the Metropolitan Planning Organization, which is a Sandag. So that money will flow through, and that money is automatically divided 70-30 in this region. So we will directly receive the 30% increase on formula funding. On top of the formula funding, there's significant increases in discretionary funding programs that are going to be rolled out over time.
Okay, so my main question was, could they somehow try to adjust that so we don't get our 30%, but they can't do that?
No, we have an agreement in place
Okay.
About how those monies are apportioned.
Okay, thank you.
Is that only, Matt, is that only for the formula funding, or does that also apply to the discretionary funding?
No, the discretionary funding, probably we should change the word and call it competitive funding. So the competitive funding is is based upon the merit of your project and how well your project fits the program guidance. So that's just a competition. You submit a grant application and they decide who's the winners and who are not winners in that process.
And that's the state deciding that, not the local.
No, that's right. So there's
Yeah.
there's both state and federal competitive
Right.
sources of funding. So on the state, you'll hear us talk about TRCP, the Transit Intercity Rail Capital Program. That's a state funding source. But you'll see on the federal, like there's this grant application that we've gotten letters of support from your from your respective cities for the Federal Railroad Administration State of Good Repair Program. That's a federal source of funding. So they will come from both FTA, Federal Railroad Administration, and then you also will then have state grant opportunities.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any more questions on this slide, anyone? So
Well, I
far?
have one more bullet that's a big one on this slide is service delivery model. As you're all aware, the board authorized us to move forward with insourcing of the rail operations. That is underway. It's a significant activity that the district is undertaking. It's occurring over two years. So the first phase will be coming up in the next couple of months. In terms of it'll be the maintenance of equipment. So the people who turn the wrenches for the choo-choo trains. And then it will be the train operators and the train crews. The second phase, which will happen in 2023, will be the maintenance away, the signal, and the facilities people. It's a significant undertaking for the district, but I can tell you it is the right decision for the district in terms of insourcing. We're coming to an inflection point on our bus operations contract. That contract, the base contract will end essentially June 30th, 2024. We are proposing to evaluate insourcing of bus operations and maintenance. But the current approach that I would like to take with it is rather than coming to the board now for a decision, is for the district to first attempt to negotiate a fully negotiated contract with the Teamsters so that we can present the actual financial impact to the board. Now, I will tell you this relates directly back to challenges from COVID-19 in terms of personnel shortages and needing to hire and retain. The other issue is going to be in terms of us being able to better control our product and quality. And as we make that transition to zero emission technologies, quality is going to become a big deal issue for the district. And so I want to put that out there as one of the major themes for you all to think about.
So Matt, so for those who haven't been on the board for very long, I think it's important to maybe take a moment to explain that at one time NCTD did do all of this, then they started outsourcing. Can you give us a little background on that?
Yes, ma'am. So I'm going to first clarify that rail operations has always been contracted out at the district. So, we've had a series of contractors beginning with Amtrak to Herzog and now to Bombardier. On the bus side, up until I arrived, bus operations was always directly operated by NCTD. But let me give you the context. So when I was hired in 2008, the district was facing what we called a financial tsunami. The district faced a 5-year, $80+ million budget deficit. And we collaborated with the union. So we negotiated with the union to outsource because there was no way for us to resolve our budget issue without draconian layoffs that exceeded likely 50%. So we worked with the union and came up with a way to outsource it. We've spent the last 10 years of revamping our business model and our finances so that we're not in the same place that we were in 2008 when I arrived. So when I arrived in 2008, the district had no reserves and essentially was in a negative position permanently. Now we're in a dramatically different place financially, to include us now working towards by 2030 becoming debt free. So that provides the context. So when we outsource, it was really just about the decision of how we could navigate through a very significant financial period of time for the district. So it really did work well for us in terms of us achieving the goal. Now we're at an inflection point about how do we want to go forward in the future. You know, there's major considerations for us in terms of things like mobility as a service, integrating the workforce to enhance efficiency, but product management and quality is going to be a big deal issue. And transitioning to zero emission technology is going to be a really, really big deal issue that's going to require us to be significantly better in the quality of maintenance activities and training opportunities, both for the operators and the mechanics that we're where we are today.
Okay, does anyone have any questions?
Yes, I do. So Matt, when you outsourced the employees, wasn't it some of it to have a savings as far as retirement liability?
It was so Sharon, it was overall cost cutting and cost management and containment. And again, I think over top of all of that, Sharon, is I'll continuously say is that the entire workforce came together to say that this was a very difficult time and that the priority for the district was maintaining as many jobs as possible for our employees. Remember, this was the Great Recession.
Mm-hmm.
And keeping the largest amount of service out on the street for our customers. And I will tell you, it was literally one of the most collaborative timeframes I've ever experienced in my professional career in terms of frontline employees, the labor union, and NCTD staff and the board being aligned towards working towards a common goal.
Okay.
Karina has her hand up. Karina?
Sure, thanks. I just want to comment on some of the goals that we have when it comes to, increasing ridership and on-time performance. And I really am in support of the insourcing. One of the trends that I saw, and I think we pretty much all saw it, was as our fleet aged, there was just a lot more mechanical failures, right? And so we have a younger fleet. What we don't want to happen is have all this money that we've invested, whether it be, in electric or hydrogen buses. These are newer technologies, and maintenance is going to be extremely important for us to manage our fleet better. I always do have a concern when it comes to the maintenance side, in the way that, from bus operator to mechanic, what that transition of information can be like, and to create more efficiencies and streamline the way that we maintain our vehicles for performance, right? So thank you so much. I just wanted to make a comment on that.
Well, thank you. If there's no other comments, I can go to the next slide.
Yes.
There's a lot more here. Another one of those major themes from both a national and international area of focus is social justice, equity, and climate change. I think we're all aware of these issues and how these issues have been highlighted over the last couple of years. Later in the presentation, I will talk a little bit about some of the strategies around these areas of focus that I think we need to engage. I would also tell you, I think these national and international areas of focus are also part of how do we grow our ridership and how do we improve our workforce. These are significant things that have obvious connections. Sometimes we don't think about it until we really start thinking about it. I see Karina's hand is up.
Yeah, sorry, Matt, you just got me real excited on that point, and there really is a deep connection between, the climate crisis that we're in, the awareness that people have of it, and the opportunities to radically mitigate the greenhouse gas impacts that we have at this time. And public transit is right there at that nexus. So it's a great marketing strategy. It's a great just overall nexus to unpack, to see, how we can move the needle on ridership, and have people, be able to express their agency and personal responsibility, and start utilizing different ways to move about their day. So yeah, that's all for me. I just got excited. Sorry.
Revenue development is going to be a key element. We need to focus on generating new sources of revenue. I can tell you some of the changes that have been made to the fare system from a regional perspective, that even if we regain ridership and grow ridership, we're going to generate less customer revenue. And let me explain to you why. From the beginning, NCTD has advised all stakeholders that fare capping was going to be a money loser. It was going to result in loss of revenue, and that's manifesting itself. One of the other changes that took place was the elimination of transfers. The elimination of transfers obviously results in loss of revenue. And I think, where we've moved from a fair position with us even reinstating the Sprinter Breeze and pass and looking to make it permanent is a good place. It just means that we need to grow revenue from other places. I think you all saw that we advanced the naming rights, and the board approved that last month. We talked about our investments in our real estate as a source of revenue. I'm just putting this on the table to say, hey, the district is going to have to be more creative in terms of how we generate additional revenue sources. And at the same time, that gives us more flexibility. We don't want to be solely dependent upon sales tax as the primary operating source. The next one is community engagement and collaboration. I think I should have put that as a worldwide theme. One of the things we definitely want to understand better is how we engage with all of our communities. How do we know what our stakeholders want and need? And how do we measure success in community engagement and collaboration? This really does tie back to social justice, equity, and climate change discussion. I know as I started working on some of this stuff, I really realized we do have some significant gaps. But beyond just in that sphere, in terms of how well do we collaborate with our cities, other agencies, we're in an era where we need to be able to share cost and benefits and leverage and work together towards a shared vision. This is going to be a challenge for us because, candidly, from a political point of view, we're more afraid across all political bodies at all levels than we ever have been, and seem to have kind of a incapability of being able to focus towards future prosperity. I think the NCTD board, the executive director and staff team, we really need to work and prioritize community engagement and collaboration in a way that maybe most agencies aren't thinking about it today, but it's going to be tough to do big things and important things and things that are important to our citizenry if we are not engaged with the communities that we serve and collaborating to create mutual benefits and sharing of expenses and other burdens.
Karina, do you have another question?
I do. Yes. Matt, I have a question regarding collaboration. Now, I don't know a ton about FACT, but I'm starting to learn more about FACT. And I just, I want to know, what is the scope of collaboration? Are we looking at all of our regional partners and possible partnerships? Can you
Yes,
just
ma'am.
elaborate on that a little bit more? Thanks.
Yes, ma'am. So to answer your question specifically, yes, fact is part of the discussion of how we can collaborate. We need to work through some details. We maybe can collaborate, or we maybe won't be able to collaborate. Fact has a fundamentally different mission and mandate than the district does, but there are potential opportunities that we can collaborate upon if we can achieve alignment. We have tried historically, but I do think the next time we do approach fact in an effort to collaborate, I feel like I need to make sure that this process is much more transparent to policymakers rather than me attempting to work this independently with their executive director.
Okay. Yeah. And, just because I'm newer in the sense that, I don't have the historical context of the previous attempts of collaboration. So, yeah, I would like to, this is probably not the place to do it, but maybe in a future discussion, just understand, what are some of the areas that we overlap where, we can collaborate, and where are some areas that, we need maybe a deep philosophical intervention. So I don't know at all, what that landscape looks like, but I'm excited that we're going to be, exploring these different avenues to grow our collaboration and partnerships. So that is something that I would like to, just be, I guess, informed about, in a larger sense. What are the pros? What are the cons? What is it that we can do to make this transition towards collaboration, successful one the next time that we meet up with fact. So
Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Sharon?
I have another question. Several years ago, pre-COVID, feels like an eternity, there was discussion about having a state of transit meeting. So when I think about collaboration and engaging with the community, I immediately thought back to that as that something like that. I know that's a lot of work. I don't know if when or what that might look like, but would that be something like that be a good first step to kind
Yes,
of
ma'am.
put us out there and say, let's all work together?
I totally agree. We kept putting it on the agenda to have it, and we kept then getting COVIDed year after year. I think that should be something that we put on the table and then start working towards setting, an event date, kind of very similar to what Cal State San Marcos does in terms of their annual event. We should be looking towards having kind of an annual state of NCTD type of an event.
Okay.
Great suggestion, Sharon. Thanks for bringing that up again. Matt, go ahead.
All right, next slide. All right, additional. Obviously, now we're moving into budget guidance. So I've covered kind of the major themes. Now I'm going to talk about some details of some of the activities that go along with it. Some of these are already underway. Some of them will be new activities, okay? So obviously transition from pandemic to endemic. And so we have already advanced some key studies to understand current and future mobility patterns and needs. That information is going to be coming to the board over time. I think we're probably targeting for March for the first check-in on data that we're collecting. We are continuing to conduct surveys. We have been conducting surveys at schools. I know we're partnering with board member Contreras to get a deeper dive of information from Vista. I have a call later with City of Ocean, the School District of Oceanside. We're really trying to get a deep dive of information through surveys to really gain a better understanding of what our customers want, and really digging down from a market segmented point of view to get a better understanding. We do have some results from some of the surveys, but I don't think that survey can be complete from the school perspective until we get a significant dose of information from Vista and Oceanside. We're going to need to make increased investments in government affairs, planning, marketing, and communications. These are areas that we have traditionally skimped on, and I have been your government affairs person for some time. I'm ready to fire myself. And in marketing and communications and planning, we have traditionally underinvested. We've consolidated all of these functions under Mr. Orlando. We've also hired a new strategic manager, and these investments will help us compete within the realm of all of these discretionary dollars, but also to really emphasize our need to grow ridership and develop ridership and help people transition from their normal commute that they would think would be the case to public transportation. One of our key areas of focus is hiring and retention of bus operators and other frontline positions. We're receiving quite a bit of positive feedback about the insourcing of rail. And before I had this call with you all today, we just had a 1-hour conversation with the Teamsters about bus operations insourcing. And that was a very positive and productive conversation that we're going to continue working towards, trying to see if we can come up with an agreement that we can present to the board. We're going to try to advance implementing the microtransit in San Marcos and in Carlsbad. The big deal emphasis is we have to be able to hire people. If we can't hire people, we can't launch this service in June or July timeframe. We are planning to enhance our safety and security resources. So one of the things that we're doing is planning to enhance the contract with the sheriff's contract. We're planning to discontinue the contracts that we've had with Oceanside and Escondido for police department support. In fact, we've already notified them of that because we need to really consolidate and focus our safety and security program. It's one of the emerging themes coming from COVID, the increased criminal activity and other types of behaviors. We've been working on this throughout the pandemic. I do believe that MCTD is a little bit ahead of the curve, but we want to continue to make investments so that when people ride the system, they can feel safe and secure.
So Matt, can you explain a little further if we're letting go of the police in Escondido and Oceanside, then who will be, are we going to insource?
No. We were adding to our sheriff's contract. And and the support that those cities were doing was on overtime details. And the issue is that we have a very detailed and comprehensive program and a dedicated law enforcement unit with the sheriffs. So we have our own sheriff's unit.
Okay. And do the sheriffs have the right to work in those cities?
Oh, absolutely. And those cities still will respond. And one of the things that we said we were going to work on was creating an incentive program. We need to get those cities to be more proactive and responsive. The overtime work didn't do that. It didn't create that. And so we're going to try to promulgate some standards for response time that we can track and quality. We need the cities to see us not as a separate entity, but part of their communities. And some of these cities with independent law enforcement, they don't really collaborate as well as we would like them to collaborate.
Well, I think it was worth trying.
Yes.
I do think that there's an advantage to integrating it all from one vendor, so to speak, with the sheriff. And I think then you have, across the board, same procedures and expectations and whatnot.
Yeah. And one of the things I will just mention is one of the added benefits is that we're going to get someone who can be able to do the detailed investigations of events, to go to the operators and get the reports from the operators or from the mechanics, and then really dig deep in terms of investigating to resolve issues. I will also tell you that we worked through with Supervisor Desmond, and we've gotten resources from the county. We're trying to build out the framework of collaboration to help us to address homelessness issues as well as mental health issues. So we're trying to look at the full spectrum within the framework of what the county provides.
Well, I think that that's positive, especially with the county bringing on the mobile critical response teams And because not everything requires police action, sometimes it just requires a little different handling. Karina?
Yeah, you know what, that last part I think is really important. Understanding, some of the behavioral health issues. I was just doing the point in time count, and my territory was actually Mission, and pretty close to Nordal and Yum Yums. And so, I know that area. I used to have to go to work pretty early in the morning over there. And, I had a conversation with an individual, and there was an encampment of 4 people. And, people are really wanting some kind of positive contact. And, not having simply a badge and a gun be the only point of contact is going to be extremely important for our communities. I know in the city, we're trying, in my city, Avista, we're trying to move forward conversations on shelter, but I think this is a good move. What I also have a question about is I know that there's some new state laws, and at the municipality level and at the county level, there's going to be a review of how law enforcement is utilizing certain weapons. Is that conversation, does that happen at this level as well with our contract with the sheriffs? I'm kind of out of the loop on how the board reviews contracts with law enforcement. So if you could just address that for me so I have a better understanding.
Yeah, so as it relates, so a little bit different from your city in the sense that I'm delegated to operate, to manage the day-to-day operations of the transit district. So I engage directly along with my entire team with the sheriff's department. In fact, we have a monthly meeting, and I think that monthly meeting is coming up this week. We really do dig down into detail in collaboration with our security department about what is happening on a system-wide basis. Karina, the conversations the comments that you just made echo comments that we've had in those settings with the sheriff's department, with them bringing to the table and helping us identify additional resources about trying to differentiate, because we do have populations of people who are mentally challenged that, that on a day-to-day basis engage in a way that is not the desired way on our system. And we know that's not really needed to be handled from a law enforcement perspective. And that's why we were so happy that when we sent that letter to the county, that we received a positive response. Because unlike you all that have cities, you get direct engagement through the fact that you're a city. We're not a city, and now the county is aware of kind of the unique nature of NCTD with our right-of-way and with our facilities and how we're kind of out there alone. So we're engaging directly with the county to develop the program around what will best support NCTD and our sheriff's contract detail.
Thank you. Thanks for that information. It's very helpful.
Yes, ma'am.
Thanks, Ben. I don't see any more questions. Go ahead.
Okay, so obviously manage inflation impacts and optimize expenses. So we need to make sure we're really scrutinizing all new agreements and understanding the long-term financial impacts. Continuously working to see where we can reduce expenses. I'll give you an example of an area where we need to really look close at is positive train control. We're spending about $6-7 million a year on that system. It doesn't add any ridership. Yes, it does have a safety benefit, but we need to make sure we maintain high quality performance, but we need to continue to work towards reducing the cost. We've made some major strides because the original cost for us to maintain it was significantly higher, and we insourced portions of it and directly providing that maintenance. We may be doing more of that in the future to continuously reduce that and to make that just a normalized technology. We need to really leverage our technologies. This is something that I'm taking the lead on within the district of pushing us to fully utilize technologies that we purchased over time and gain that benefit that we should be getting with them. And obviously, Again, looking at partnerships, we've had discussions with BNSF and with others about how we can do things together to reduce costs or deliver projects more efficiently and effectively. That again is just a major theme for us.
Sharon.
You're on mute, Sharon.
There we go. I bet you'd like me to stay on mute.
No, ma'am.
So question about your new agreements and all that. Our fuel expenses that we currently have, anticipating that fuel might be going up, are we locked into those for so many years? And when do you have to look at those again?
No, so so for years, NCTD, we had figured out, we had analyzed about a decade plus fuel price history, and we had identified what was the sweet price, the sweet point in each calendar year to execute a fixed price contract. And over time, the vendors are no longer offering us the fixed price contracts because there were years where we significantly achieved big savings as compared to what the going market rate is. And so we've reverted back to what everyone does typically, is purchase off of the weekly spot price of fuel and plus the cost of delivery.
Okay, so we don't have any more long-term contracts.
No, ma'am.
So we're going to be stuck with rising costs in those areas.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thanks.
You're welcome. Next slide, please. All right, budget guidance in terms of strategic plan update. I think most of you all have been reached out to a consultant, Lori Goffigan, in terms of us looking at our strategic plan, making sure it's relevant. It's also going on internally. We are actively engaging customers and employees and external stakeholders to really support that update and hopefully to see if we can get everyone to be more cohesive around how we advance the region and how do we leverage the benefits that NCTD provides. In terms of social equity, I'm going to provide a little bit more detail. We are going to advance a study to conduct an equity analysis related to our transit operations. This is kind of taking a more proactive approach to looking at decisions that we have made historically or contemporaneously related to how we set up institutions for fares. So that you need to go to a 7-Eleven to get a card and looking at all facets of things that we do. One of the key pieces that we want to do is to really be able to identify these different communities and understand who we should be talking to, who we should be collaborating to get this information, and not be making these decisions or relying upon Title VI analysis, which I view as more a reactive process versus to proactive engagement early on in terms of the capital decisions that we make and operating decisions that we make. We want to make sure those stakeholders are identified and we know how to collaborate with them and get information from them. We do want to advance a low income fare for Coaster. We have been communicating with Metrolink. They're a little bit ahead of us in some respects in terms of coordination with the fare system provider. We're going to wait for them to finish their implementation, and then we're going to take advantage of what they paid for and piggyback with them to implement a consistent program. We are coming to the board with an item this month that would ask the board to provide support for us to permanently add the Sprinter Breeze fare reductions to the regional fare ordinance. We also, from the climate action plan point of view, is we are going to conduct, we're going to develop a climate change action plan so that we can measure the activities that we're undertaking and be able to provide progress reports to the board in a meaningful way. And obviously, we want to advance the fleet transition to zero emission. This includes rail. So we are already in discussions with the state, with vehicle manufacturers, and with Metrolink on a partnership for locomotives and potentially for multiple unit trains that could be rolled out over the course of the next 3 to 5 years to demonstrate battery and other types of technology that would be zero emission from a train operations point of view.
Matt, can I just ask a quick question about the last under social equity, permanently add the Sprinter Breeze? You said fare reduction, but the slide only says fare to the vision.
It's the fare product. It already provided a reduction. Remember, we implemented it as a pilot a year ago, and now it's time to go to SANDAG to say, let's make it permanent.
Okay.
This also helped mitigate some of the impacts of fare capping, because this fare product is only available within the North County service area, which means we capture 100% of the revenue. Next slide. Service quality improvement. Obviously, we need to execute on insourcing of rail operations. I discussed the evaluation of bus paratransit and ADA paratransit insourcing. Enhancing our data analytics capabilities. I discussed that a little bit, but that's going to be one of the key things for us. And continue focused in on implementing our technical services and material management agreements across all modes. Again, as we transition to these new types of technologies, training, materials, and the ability to quickly identify potential failures before they occur is just going to be critical. The other element is revenue and real estate development. Again, we just provided a briefing to you all about the transit-oriented development projects, and you already have approved the name and rights contract. One of the key things that we have to execute upon in terms of our real estate strategy projects to execution. We don't want to wait and be constrained by Tracy being super duper busy. So we want to add a resource to focus in on getting these agreements executed. Next slide. We need to continue to fund and successfully implement state of good repair and priority capital needs. We do need to invest in personnel and other resources to support. That was kind of identified in terms of what we're going to do in terms of hiring a government affairs officer and a strategic business officer. Those resources are key because we do need to free up our transit planning department to focus on transit planning. At the same time, we need to really hammer home these grant applications and get those additional dollars. One of the things I know I've heard from our employees that they feel a little stretched from the broad mandates and the heavy workload coming from the executive director. So some of this is responsive to the feedback that employees are giving me. Outreach and strategic partnerships, again, we've talked about this a little bit, but again, it's going to be one of the key themes of the budget guidance. Next slide. So the potential impacts is proposed about investing in the future. So I wouldn't be coming to you with something that I didn't think was going to bring the district to a better place. It will likely lead to an increase in our budget, in our baseline budget and staffing requirements. Some of this will be offset, but I can tell you one of the things that we need to be careful about is, for example, rail insourcing. We demonstrated that we could do this kind of cost neutral to the district. But the truth of the matter is we looked at Metrolink and other agencies, and I think Metrolink's costs for rail contracting when they went to a new contract a year ago increased about 50%. And if we were to go out to bid for outsourcing a rail again, I can tell you at a minimum, we would be faced with a 30% increase. So in some instances, we are just pushing back on what would have likely been significantly higher increases. And it's one of the reasons that we're proposing insourcing is also just a value proposition of what we're paying for what we're getting. Revenue generating collaboration activities are identified to diversify our revenue sources. So that's just the key piece over the next 5 years is we need to get these agreements executed and we need to get them in a place where we can start seeing the revenue. Remember, if we can get the village project done, it's a revenue estimate between $2.5 million to $5 million per year in new revenue to the district if that project were to be implemented. Next slide. So we're about that point where I will get quiet again. So this is kind of the committee discussion area. You guys need to provide me direction about this. I will never tell you that any strategy carries no risk. All strategies, including doing nothing, carry risk, rewards, and potential negative impacts. Again, you're going to be required to adopt a balanced operating budget. And we always work towards demonstrating a 5-year balanced budget in terms of the district. But I do think it's a critical time frame, like all of the time, in terms of shaping the future sustainability and prosperity of NCTD. There's a lot at play here. There are things that are very positive, but there are also real challenges that need to be addressed as we move into this next budget. Next slide. This is kind of just the next steps in terms of budget activities. Next slide. And now the floor is yours.
Okay. Well, I think that we've asked questions pretty well all along. I don't see any hands raised at this time. Imelda, are there any public comments on this item?
No, ma'am.
Okay, at this time, we're ending the public registration to speak on this item. One last chance to ask questions of Matt. Does anyone have any more questions? Seeing none.
I have a question.
Except for Sharon.
I'm raising my hand.
Okay.
Matt, back on page 8, you talked about climate action plan and developing that, and you talked about advancing fleet zero emission transition, including rail. Weren't our recent acquisition of our new locomotives, weren't those supposed to be the most efficient as possible? And since we keep these for as long as we do, how do we work from where we are to where you want to be?
Yeah. So a couple of things. So first, from a practical point of view, we purchased Tier 4 locomotives, which is the cleanest emissions technology that's available today, right? But those are not zero emissions. The state is in the process, the State Air Resources Board, of promulgating regulations similar to what they did on a bus fleet that would require you to make a transition to zero emissions. But at the same time, we're going to need to replace the Sprinter fleet in 2030 by 2033. So this is a good inflection point in time. And Sharon, as it relates to the existing fleet of locomotives, there are opportunities that, should they manifest itself, we may start with a demonstration project. So we would maintain our current fleet of 9 Tier 4 locomotives and add a couple of zero emissions locomotives to test the feasibility and the performance of those locomotives. And if that locomotives deemed operationally successful, we could potentially lease or sell the locomotives that we have today.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, that looks like that's it for you, Matt. The third item on the agenda is closed session. As a reminder to those participating remotely, that's all of us, you must connect to this Zoom invite in order to participate in closed session. At the end of closed session, you will need to reconnect to the committee meeting. Lori Winfrey, General Counsel, will now take us into closed session. Lori?
Yes, good morning, Board Chair Edson and our committee members. We're now going to go into closed session for my very favorite topic, which is my performance review pursuant to Government Code Section 54957.6. Okay. I think
Everyone is back on. You have a quorum.
Okay, thank you. So the executive committee met in closed session to conduct my performance review for general counsel pursuant to government code section 54957.6 and NCTV board policy number 3, and found my performance to exceed expectations. The committee is recommending the advancement of a compensation incentive to the employment agreement to the full board in open session at its regular meeting on March 17th, 2022. That concludes my report out. Thank you.
Board Chair Edson, you are on mute.
Okay, now I'm not. Our next scheduled meeting is the regular board meeting, March 17th, 2022 at 2 p.m. If there are no comments from or questions from board members, I will adjourn this meeting. Seeing no hands raised, meeting's adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.